Chairman, thank you, and I want to thank the chairman for producing this report. It raises some serious questions about whether Medicaid expansion is having a counterproductive impact on the opioid epidemic by proliferating prescription opioid pills. I come from a state that is an expansion state. It's the state of Montana. I'm particularly concerned by the report's exposure of how Medicaid expansion dollars have resulted in addiction among some recipients and facilitated illicit distribution of these drugs to others struggling with substance dependence. In short, the report provides, I would argue, a more complete picture on the consequences of Medicaid expansion, and we must not ignore its conclusions. First question, Mr. Adolphson. You mentioned in your testimony that 52% of able-bodied adults on Medicaid do not work, and that only 16% work full-time. Can you share more about the positive correlation that you have found between having a job and reducing drug dependency among healthy, working-age Americans?
Thank you, Senator. That's right. That data that you referenced is very clear. The number of able-bodied adults on Medicaid has quadrupled from 7 million in 2000 to 28 million today. Half of those do not work at all. We know from the addiction specialists, the recovery community, that work is a pillar of recovery. And certainly in a program that is paying for the amount of substance abuse that treatment that Medicaid is, I think it makes a lot of sense to encourage and assist people getting back to work. Unfortunately, it's not what we see. We're seeing the roles, particularly for able-bodied adults, continue to grow, and many of those people are not working at all.
Are you aware of what percentage of able-bodied Medicaid recipients actually return to full-time gainful employment?
Well, what we're seeing is enrollment continue to go up. So if they were moving into full-time employment, if you work even at minimum wage full-time, you're out of poverty. So if folks were quickly getting back in the workforce, working a full-time job or a couple part-time jobs, they would quickly cycle off of Medicaid because they would be earning income above the threshold. It's just not what we're seeing. We're seeing folks come onto the program, stay on the program. So unfortunately, that's an indicator that it hasn't been successful at returning people to work the way we would like to see.
Why is that? What do you see? I mean, it's usually all about incentives. What's the incentive to stay on Medicaid versus move and become gainfully employed?
Sure. There are probably a lot of things that go into that, but I think one thing we probably can all agree on is we all need deadlines and a push in our life to accomplish certain things. And Medicaid has been free of any requirement for kind of community engagement or work activities. That hasn't been a hallmark of the program, which historically might have made more sense when there weren't able-bodied working-age adults on the program. But as I mentioned, that number has grown dramatically with the expansion under ACA. And I think that kind of incentive structure is needed within the program to help clear that pathway and encourage people to get back into the workforce or into training or volunteering in community engagement.